order, 10:08.
Roll call. Director Chacon?
Present.
Director Gualtieri?
Present.
Director Garza?
Here.
Thank you. Quorum has been established. And I certify the agenda has been posted in accordance with the order. We have
No presentation.
no presentations. We move on to public comments.
Public
We
comment.
have one public comment from Mr. Lee Squire. Excuse me.
Lee Squire, City of Downey Auditor Fraud Examiner, President and Board. Subject, fraud, deceit, and dishonesty. Capstone and Delterra. I'm asking each board member to send a letter to the LEDA's office demanding a criminal investigation into Capstone and fraud upon Central Basin Municipal Water District, the voters, and the property taxpayers. I'm asking for this letter to be demonstrated by your fiduciary duty with an absolute loyalty to we the people and having that letter on this letterhead of the Central Basin Municipal Water District and copies to each of the cities that you say that you represent. I want to thank the San Gabriel Valley Tribune. I've also provided you copies of the newspaper article. Articles were also sent to the cities of Bellflower, Downey, Santa Fe Springs, Signal Hill, the Los Angeles County Office of Education, and Basin Unified School District. I'm also in contact and will be sending this to the LEDA's office on behalf of we the people of the City of Downey and all of the member cities. To the FBI, I am also requesting an investigation into possible RICO and federal mail fraud statutes involving public officials. Personally, I want to thank Letitia Vasquez Wilson and Ron Wilson and her husband. I want to thank you arrogant ones for bringing up a lawsuit that surfaced Capstone and its fraud against we the people of Central Basin Municipal Water District. Again, I'm asking each one of you to submit a letter separately to the LEDA's office asking for a criminal investigation into Capstone. Thank you. Here's my comments for the public record. And a copy attached is the article.
Any more public comments?
Next, we have Maggie Moe.
Good morning, Central Water Basin. Maggie Moe from the City of Whittier. So I also would like to recap on this article. Central Basin hired company secretly tied to general manager's co-defendant in bribery case. A board member claims Alex Rojas and his supporters have turned the water district into a criminal enterprise. As a constituent of the City of Whittier, I'm embarrassed that we have this kind of criminal activity. You know, I sometimes listen to you board members, and when you guys can't come up with a reason why you're deficit or why you're not ahead of the game, but you're actually behind the game, and where money is, where we need money, you guys just say, oh, well, we're just gonna raise the water rates to the constituents. Well, that's not right. You know, do your job properly, stop with with all of this corruption. You know, and I sometimes wonder also, like, where are our leaders? I've asked many times, our representatives, where are they in situations like this? When things like this go out, I would like to know where our representatives are. So, I guess, you know, that's the reason why the leaders are here today. We're the leaders, the people here. We're the ones that have to have a voice because our leadership is nowhere to be found. And so I sometimes wonder if they're involved with this corruption as well. Because birds of a feather fly together, right? Thank you.
Liz?
Next, we have,
Good morning, everyone. I'm back here, same news as always. I want to show you guys this article, which I want the record to reflect that I am turning it in. And it's an article that was printed 3 days ago by Star Pasadena. They're talking about the usual perjury, embezzlement, and corruption that Mr. Alex Rojas is associated with here. He's facing criminal litigation on 18 counts. And no matter how many times his lawyers try to extend it, he's running out of a leash. And soon he'll be facing charges that are very serious. So I'm looking forward to that. But while we're waiting for that, I want to tell you guys, as board members, he's becoming a liability to you guys. Your names are now starting to appear on these newspapers. The people in all the cities that the Central Basin represents, they're becoming not only aware of his corruption, but of your names, because you guys are sitting on this board today. So whatever he does and whatever he ends up with in court, that's going to reflect on how you ran your business here at the Central Basin. So I'm telling you guys, it is in your best interest. The smartest choice is to get rid of the liability. Kick him out. Give him the boot to the ass. He's a problem for you and your career, and you don't want that. You guys, some of you guys, I know that you guys are planning to run again. Do you want these things showing up in your next campaign cycle? Do you want the community who is supposed to vote for you, or the clubs, like the Democratic clubs or organizations, to ask you what happened with this at Central Basin and what did you do about it when this news was brought up to you? My suggestion is, if you care about your career, about your track record, about your legal record, because this could be potential legal liability for you as well, cut the liability. I know he ran businesses for you, and he served this purpose, but now it's time to get rid of him. He's more damaged than he is worth to you guys at this point. There's no reason to keep him. The DA is aware of this, and we're going to continue to push the community to call him out at the federal level, at the county level. The newspapers are not giving up. We're not giving up. You've seen us here for years already. We're not getting paid for this. This is love for our community. So that we're not motivated by anything other than justice. And we're going to be a pain in the ass because we're holding you guys accountable. And until that guy is gone, you're going to keep hearing about it, and your names are going to keep appearing in newspapers and websites saying that you're not doing your job. And expect to hear that your next election cycles. I'm the representative delegate of the 64th District for the Democratic Party, and I'm telling you, do your job.
Liz?
That is all.
Okay, let's move on then. Item 5, staff presentations. We have none.
We have none.
Okay, item 6.
Information discussion item, resolution number 1220-1008, discussion of the consent calendar.
So this is an information discussion item, and the reason why it's put on as information as discussion is because if there's any edits that are going to be recommended, then we can make the edits and then take it to the board as an action item. So as you know, in 2020, Central Basin, well, let's go back. In 2015, there was a state audit done by the state of California, which pointed out a lot of issues that were affecting Central Basin in terms of its operations and its ability to run as an effective agency. It pointed out the politicization of the board, the overreach of the board into operational decision-making, and the turnover of general managers. Many of these general managers have sued the district for harassment, retaliation, much of which was based on accusations and harassment by board members alleging that they were doing illegal things. So sort of similar to what you're seeing happening here. Central Basin paid out, I don't know, maybe over $1 million to these general managers. All of this affected our credit rating, and so both Standard & Poor's and Moody's had expressed serious concerns about the ongoing ability of Central Basin to even exist at the time. It downgraded its credit ratings to, I believe, CCC minus, which is, I think, either the step before junk status, or maybe it is qualified as the first tier of junk status. That means that as far as the investors that purchase our bonds are concerned, we are at high risk of non-repayment. At the time, that was important because the evaluation of our ability to repay our debt was based on our revenue. We had seen a significant decline in revenue since 2018 and had not made any structural changes to the organization. So as part of the other thing that hurt us was we had Standard & Poor's and Moody's representatives would attend our board meetings to make observations, and they observed that in many cases, sometimes we would have business partners who would present to the board on whatever business they had with the district, and they would be attacked. There were questions of decorum and professionalism, and in some cases, the the board got so toxic that members would walk out and we would lose quorum. My second board meeting here at Central Basin started, gavelled in on January the 28th. September the 28th of 2020 at 10 o'clock in the morning. And it finished on, I don't know, maybe 2 o'clock on September the 29th. It was a 2-day meeting. We had not, on the first day, I think we had been in the meeting for over 4 to 5 hours, and we're still not able to even get past the first agenda item. So Standard & Poor's raised those issues to us. So in working with the board and doing research on how we could ensure the timely and effective running of our meetings, we came up with this resolution. Now, the reason why this resolution is up for discussion today is specifically in reference to item number 7. So if you go to item number 7 of the resolution, it talks about the consent calendar. And so the reason why the consent calendar was basically limited to routine ratifications of operating procedures was because things were being pulled from the consent calendar that would again, these items, in some cases, the items had already been decided on and approved by the board, but yet then they would be pulled, and then in one case, I believe one of the observers from the investment firm stated that there was a $250 check payable that was paid to a Chamber of Commerce in which a board member spoke about it for an hour and a half. And then shortly thereafter, the board, I believe the board lost quorum and was unable. So when I got here, we had about, I don't know, Sharon could remind me, but we had probably about 4 or 5 board meetings of consent calendar items that had not been approved for lack of quorum. And so in most public agencies, the consent calendars is reserved for regular and routine items. You will have like contract renewals, you will have sometimes you will have new contracts, you will have other items that have not been considered by the board before that are new items coming before the board, but they're considered regular or routine. And so usually what ends up happening is if there's a board member that is like, well, wait a minute, I see a contract here to do X, Y, and Z. I'd like to pull that for discussion. What we did when we were drafting this resolution was we told the board we would not put any such item in the consent calendar that had not already come before the board. In essence, our consent calendar is literally the public disclosure of the warrants that have been paid, the minutes of our meetings, and any reports and correspondence that needs to be filed. And so that's why that was set up on there, was so that we could get through our meetings and not have it be held up for things in which were already decided. So I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a check payable to Baker, Keenan, and Nahara, and somebody has a question on that check. If you pull that out, if you pulled that item for discussion, it's fine, but it's on the warrant list because it's already been paid. So it's just a ratification or a public disclosure of those warrants that have been paid. If you have a question about the contract in which the thing is paid, we can always discuss that separately. You can always pull that item and say, I want an update on, the contract. So if the board would like to modify this, the only stipulation or the only request would be that we have the same time limit for discussion that we do for other action items. Only so that, if an item is pulled, we answer the questions, and then, they can be discussed or voted on separately, but that we continue to try to protect the ability for the district to run an efficient meeting and not have things be drawn out unnecessarily. So that's the background as to why this resolution was passed. But more specifically, the question was about item number 7, and so that's what we're here to look at today. So Derek's here to answer any questions you might have, and I can answer any questions you might have regarding that. So I don't know, Chair, if you want to just go down the order of the members, if they have any questions.
Well, Terry?
I'm glad that this is here. I'm not in favor of just opening up without the 3-minute discussion for a time limit. I think that would keep us going. I'm not in favor of pulling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items off of the payment register. I'm firm in coming in saying, hey, I have a discussion, I want to know about this draft, this draft, this draft, this draft. That should be able to be brought up and then be answered in that aspect. I would prefer that that is open so we can have discussion. When I come in here and I see the consent items, if I had a question on the minutes because they're not right or something like that, in what they're saying is I have to vote no on everything because there's something on there that isn't correct. I can't pull it to say, hey, there's something not correct in there. I think we should be able to make a comment on something in the agenda, on the consent item, if something's not right, without having to say no, and then you're a no vote for everything, because you're not necessarily voting no for everything.
Correct.
Okay, so I'm in favor of being able to take the minutes by itself, things like that need to be discussed. If there's something, the draft part of it checks, I think that should actually be its own separate item outside of, so you should have your consent items that has your typical stuff.
Non-warrant consent items and then warrant items.
And then you have a warrant item that is separate from that, and then you could talk about the warrants, and that gives us, the board, each board member an opportunity to ask stuff about the warrant list.
Copy. Okay. Thank you for your.
And you keep it at 3 minutes for whatever that is.
Okay.
Director Garza?
Thank you, Chair. I honestly, I, as I've said before, I've never been part of a public organization where the governance wasn't allowed to pull things from consent. I've never seen it, and as I've gotten a pulse from others and other governing agencies, they're actually quite shocked that as a governing agency we don't do that. So completely against limitations on the board of any kind. I think this board is different than what it was before. I understand that the limitations that were placed were because of different circumstances, different board members back then, but I think this board is different. And so to have a static policy that limits future boards is unfair. It's always a dynamic process. So to undergo this type of review is healthy. It happens. So I definitely respect what Director Galtieri mentioned. I'm not opposed to his requested edits to be forwarded to the board. In line with that spirit, I would ask that that would also, for the full board to consider striking item number 1 of page 6 from the old resolution that limits board members' comments to 3 minutes. As we saw from even just the actual budget process that we undertook, to be limited to 3 minutes when approving a multi-million-dollar budget is really just, I've never seen it. And so I'm not in favor of being limited to 3 minutes and speaking on anything. 2 is on page 6, item number 5, which is staff. It deals with staff for the resolution. I definitely don't have a challenge with the general manager and the general counsel entering a discussion. I think we should hear from staff. We should hear from our general counsel. But to have the right to enter into a discussion, to me that language just, I think at the end of the day, the governing board sits atop. And so if there's a desire by general counsel or staff to enter a discussion, I think it's healthy, but it should be at the discretion of the chair and not just interrupt board members as they're talking. So I would ask that that the full board consider adding an item in the second sentence where it says discussion. So after discussion, to insert at the pleasure of the president.
After discussion?
Mm-hmm. So the line would read, the general manager or general counsel shall have the right to enter a discussion at the pleasure of the president of any matter coming before the board. And again, that's what I've seen.
And if we check with the general counsel and it's like, if discretion or authorization is a better term, would you open to that?
Absolutely.
I mean, it'll be their language, but
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that they, yeah, so we can go on semantics, but
And
I
then-
think the spirit of what I'm asking for.
Yeah, and then on the first one, are you okay if we say, add something that we leave that in there and that we say that for each action item with the permission, now let me know what your comfort level is. You can say, like you just said, at the discretion of the chair, or if you're uncomfortable with that, then you could say with the consensus of the board, of the majority of the board, right? Not a vote, but like if you asked your colleagues, hey, would you mind if I had an additional 3 minutes? And then we say, you could have two requests for additional minutes, or a total of 12 minutes per item per board member if you wanted to, something like that.
I'm not.
So you want to strike the whole thing down?
Let me ask, I'm gonna ask a question.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so how do we keep the meeting going in the right direction if it starts going off rails? So how do we bring it back in? I'm in favor of not having necessarily a time limit on it, but I do want to keep the meeting
Absolutely.
going forward.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to go off rails, so I want people to, if I'm gonna speak, I want to be speaking on that topic directly, get to my point as quickly as I can and go, how can we make sure that that continues and it doesn't go off rails?
That's a great question, and I think, frankly, in my experience, again, having been mayor, having been president of different boards, different agencies, it's at the discretion of the chair, the president. That's what the person's there for, is to remind the colleagues that, hey, just a reminder to stick to the subject at hand. And the president, when I was mayor, believe me, I utilized my power, and everyone focused. And if they didn't, then they were warned.
I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you, Director Garza, but we've tried that several times, and we have some directors that they just have no respect, and they'll continue to go off like a firecracker, and you call it to their attention, and they just do it and do it and do it again.
Yeah.
We have one that says, "Well, who's going to throw me out?"
I mean, and
Is there a time, in your opinion, is there a time the total time per item, not for the meeting, per item that you would feel comfortable as an upper limit? 20 minutes? Because we do it for public comments,
Yeah.
right? At public comments, we say everyone gets 3 minutes, but
Yeah.
each item only gets 20 minutes.
that's the thing is that to limit ourselves to time, depending on the subject matter, it's just like in a budget, it's a really robust discussion. I mean, it takes a long time, and I don't want to start selecting as to these don't have a time frame, these do. I honestly, I just don't think it's healthy to limit ourselves. I do think that it's incumbent upon us. Like, I wouldn't mind adding an element here that ensures or that requires us to stick to the subject matter. That you can't speak to anything else. But depending on the item, it could be.
I like the idea of having an open, robust discussion. I'm used to that in my own board meetings. We have a lot of discussions, and I think each director can learn something from it. Being the time limit, I'm with you on that. And again, as long as we're able to keep the meeting going forward and keep it on topic, if it takes us, 10 minutes to have a discussion, and I mean, that's all of us talking. And it isn't necessarily going in order either, it's just one would say something, he would finish, and I say, oh, that makes sense, I understand where you're coming from. Right, and because a lot of times what happens is one director will speak, then that will go, oh, now I have something else to say to add to that, or that's a great idea, how can we go further with it? So I think we need the open discussion, but I definitely think we need to also make keep them centered on topic.
So let me do this.
Yeah,
I'm going to
absolutely.
put edits, I'll edit it, and we'll do like an option, right? I'll say, here's number 1, striking it all, right? And then I'll say, here's option 2, and then I'll come up with some sort of guardrails. It may not be like 3 minutes, right? It may be like, look, you know, each director will be allowed, we'll figure it out. But what I'm saying is, but I'm trying to find a compromise here, right? Something everybody can live with, rather than it's just, no, it's either we do the 3 minutes or we don't. It's like, let's look at it, say, we'll do the strike it, right? That'll be option one. And then option two, I'll work with Derek and we'll say, look, something to the effect of each opening discussion will be limited to 5 minutes. And then each director is entitled to an additional 5 minutes after each director has had a chance to speak. I don't know the answer yet, but I'll put both options so that way when it goes before the whole board, everybody can share their opinion.
I don't have a problem. At the end of the day, it'll be a discretion of the board
Yeah.
during the
Yeah,
board
yeah,
meeting
yeah.
what the final is. But I think for
Yeah.
purposes of the discussion today, I think I've stated my thing. I'm not opposed to alternatives. Let's see what they craft and we'll go from there.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of us having an open discussion in the middle of a meeting to
Yeah.
get everything out and be able to answer questions. And that's for any board member. You know, if I state something, any board member should be able to question me on it, or say, I agree with you, or I disagree, and here's why I disagree. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing with us. It's actually good dialogue, because then it helps as we make our decisions as we go forward.
Right.
So I'm all for that kind of
We'll put that
dialogue.
in the when it comes before, and then when you'll have that discussion, the board can discuss each one.
And then,
I have one request for clarification.
yes, sir.
Director Gualtieri mentioned that we do want to have some order, and you mentioned that the chair would say those comments out of order. In your mind, what is the next step if the chair does say, you know, for example, those comments are outside of the agenda item, please move on to something else. If the director does not comply, what is the next step? Because these are rules of order, so it's not something general counsel or the general manager can say, like, you have to leave. It's going to be board policy. How should we address that type of situation?
It's a difficult one because it's not very common. You know, for us that's over on governing boards, this type of lack of decorum is really unusual. So to tell you like this is what we should do, step 1, step 2, it's hard to say because it's really unusual. But you know, I've only had one incident where I had a member of governance that was really just completely not acting in his capacity in this case in terms of sticking to his oath and his decorum. In my case, what I did, and I was actually chairing the meeting, as I called for a recess. Called for a recess, took a break, pulled him aside, and we had a discussion. Apparently there was miscommunication at some level. Cleared it up, came back, moved forward. And again, but that's one scenario. That doesn't mean that it'll apply in every situation. But there are solutions. It just, you know, at the end of the day, we're all adults. I just need to communicate.
And I think to Derek's point there was a grand jury investigation in a city that had a situation in which there was, I think, 1 or 2 council members that were very, again, just attacking staff, off topic, filibustering, disrupting the council meetings. Whenever the city manager basically followed the directives of the board, but that one council member was unhappy, would just flood the city with public records requests or call for their evaluation to be put on the agenda. Same thing with staff. Derek has a copy of it and he's read it. The reason why I think Derek is asking what the clarification is because at the end of the day, it's ultimately the board that police itself, right?
Absolutely.
So the idea is that if he's, you know, pounding on the desk, gaveling, we're just gonna sit here, you know, but I will tell you that, you know, I was there for that 18-hour meeting. You know, appealing to people's decorum and professionalism, we'll have to see it happen. But
Yeah.
I just think we need to go in prepared.
Absolutely. You know, I and I've said this before, and it's probably not a popular comment, but you know, we're a public agency and we're a democracy. At the end of the day, it's not pretty, but in my experience, it's not perfect, but it's the best of all options. So,
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, well,
And I have one more. Yes, sir. One more. And I definitely would recommend that the board strike all of items, bullet point 7. Again, to not be able to pull items I'm not opposed,
Put a new sentence, it'll be edited and it'll have,
Yeah.
incorporate what Walter suggested.
but I definitely would request that an option be presented to the board of striking the whole thing.
So you
regarding
want that to
council.
be an option, so option
Correct,
one,
yes, sir.
option two.
Yes, sir. And again, the reason is I've never seen that. And I, as a member of governance, and any member of governance, any of my colleagues should have the right to, even if a invoice has been paid, for us to be able to have a natural question, that, hey, this one went up a little bit higher this month, what happened?
Right.
And to not have that discussion, and for the public,
Yeah.
at the end it is their money, for the public not even to know why it is that this expenditure went up, and to ask it in public is really a disservice, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
well, and again, I know this predates you, and I believe even Director Walteri, but the reason why we put this in was the agreement on the staff side was that we would only put ratification items and routine items, we wouldn't put like new contracts. But the agreement on the board side was they would email us those questions, and then, so when we got to the meeting, we knew what the questions were and we could answer them. So that's why, but if, it could be the case though that if we're not getting the questions, even if an item is pulled, we would still humbly request if you email us over the weekend, so we can get the invoice or whatever, you know what I mean? And then when you pull it and ask it, we can actually answer it. That's the only thing we would ask of the board.
Okay, so with that in mind,
Yeah.
because I do have my consent items, and then I have my warrant list. They're two separate items.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna
Okay.
do it that way.
When we get to the warrant list, I have already went through my list, and I've documented anything that may be unusual to my board. And I'll tell them what it is. And so it's up front. All of a sudden, I'm going down, so you would sit there, or Honor, or Peggy, and I'd probably recommend Peggy, being here saying, okay, with you here, you'll go through each one and you'll say, oh, this one is for this is what we paid for. And I know they're separate because I'm
Okay.
working with the public, but I'm able to tell them what it's for. That answers a lot of their questions. Because they'll go down and say, oh, you hit all of my questions.
So are you suggesting that even before we get to the item, I just preload the board with that? Or
Yeah.
are you saying,
Why not? If you have something that you think that's gonna come up, like I have one right here, it says an HSM 0032 DFS for repair. What the heck is that? Okay, I have no idea what it is. Okay, you should be able to say, this is what it was, and here's what happened.
got it.
Okay, you know what your warrants are and what you
Yeah.
guys signed. So you can already answer that question before it even gets to me,
Got it.
to asking that question.
How about if we did that, because you know how I send you the weekly agenda item, the weekly update, and the weekly update before the board agenda, it specifically only talks about the agenda. If I included some of those in there too, just so you know upfront what it might be.
You can
And
do it
again,
any
this
way
is
you
not- and
want,
this is
so it
not
helps.
And this is not precluding the answering of questions, it's just to enhance it.
And then,
So-
once we get to that, then they'll come back and if I didn't mark one, they'll say, okay, what was this for?
Okay.
Then I will answer it. If I do not know it, I go from there. Now, they don't go into a long discussion on it at that point. If there's something that they don't like in here, we have a lot of professional services, we have consulting services, things like that are different than what is on my agenda or on my warrant list. But these are something where, okay, once you answer it, then I would come in and say, all right, for the next meeting, I would like to see this consultant services agreement.
Got it.
Bring it
Okay.
back, then we're going, and then we have it, you have your backup ready to discuss, and we have that. It'll kind of keep the meeting going in some kind of order.
Okay, we can do that, for sure, definitely.
I'm not opposed to what Director Galtieri is saying. Honestly, in my experience, I usually I've gotten calls from my city manager, or I've gotten calls from the general manager before the meetings, like usually a day or two. Any concerns on the agenda? Any questions? Simple call. Yeah, I had a question on this and this and that. Okay, Rick, we'll be ready to go. On the day of, I ask a question because I want the public to hear this. And a lot of times, like literally 90% of the time, my staff would be like, hey, well, here's the answer. It's right away. I didn't know the answer. You know the answer and it's right there. And I'll say, great. Maybe most of the time I'd say, look, I'm still gonna ask it in public because I want the public
Yeah,
to
you
know.
want
Right?
to know that it's being asked.
But thank you for the answer in advance. And it's not, my style has never been a gotcha. Like, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to lend value to our organization, not to try to catch somebody off guard. And I've never been one to pump up my cred off of somebody else's failure. That's not my style. So,
Yeah, and we can do this, and we used to send out the agendas to the directors. Do you remember Director Chacon? Well, Trey, remember it used to come out like Fridays or Thursday nights. We
I
actually
believe it was probably Thursdays.
we actually moved it back to Wednesday because they said, hey, we need more time to review and ask questions. So, understood, we will put some drafts together for you,
Yeah.
and hopefully we can do that. But I do like the idea of, what I'll do is I'll talk to Peggy and Alner, and I think what I'm gonna do is, we'll have the warrants and then we'll have the non-warrants, and I think for the warrants, to Director Gualteri's point, what we can do is we can just say like, first time appearances, right? So the first time something's appearing on the warrant list that has never appeared before, it's a new contract, it's a new whatever. One-time expenditures over, and I don't know, I'll pick a threshold, $50,000, right? So you've never, you've seen this company, Infomark. You've seen Infomark before, and you've always seen them with this dollar amount. Now they're $50,000 or more higher. So let me work on a matrix for them internally, and then we'll start doing it. And if it works for you, we'll keep it. But if it's still like, hey man, can you lower that threshold? I really want to see anything over X. We can keep playing with it. But let me work with Peggy and Alner on that so we can flag it, and then we'll start putting that on there for sure.
I definitely understand there's going to be, after a while, reviewing warrants. You get a routine, like you said. After a while, you start seeing the same names. It's normal. I still don't think we should be limited in pulling things.
No, we're not. No,
Yeah.
none of this is saying
Yeah.
we're going to limit pulling.
Yep.
The only thing that the only quote unquote limits in Director Gualteri's thing is the time, the minute, like a minute requirement. But this is not, the options are not going to say you can't pull.
Yeah.
It's not gonna say that for any option.
When you're saying polling, and I'm just working off the warrant list.
Yeah.
If we were to go through and we pulled every single one of these checks,
Oh, no, I don't mean that.
that'd take us quite a while to get through.
And it's not a consent calendar. We might
What I
as well
mean
just
is,
put it
like,
all.
see under consent,
Yes,
we have these
yes.
4 items.
No, I don't have a problem with that. Polling those?
Yeah,
I
that's what I
have
mean.
no issue with
Yeah,
that.
I'm not gonna go one by one on these things. No. I can do that off.
I think it's
I can
very-
do that off.
Yeah,
Offline.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I think it's very important that this is open for a director to ask about a certain
Yeah.
draft and bring it up, let them answer real quick, and then let's go forward.
Yeah.
Not to pull it to have a full-on discussion.
Oh, no, I'm not gonna question one by, no, that's not my intent. But right now, the limitation is like, for example, if I have, which I do actually have some challenges with some of these minutes,
Mhm.
as of right now, I can't pull them.
Right, and I agree with you.
So, I just wanna have the ability
Yeah.
to pull anything and question anything.
The revisions, neither option in the revisions are gonna prohibit the pulling of any item. It's just, do we want like unlimited time or like to Gualteri, like, separate? But so there is not gonna be any restrictions on that.
Yeah, no, it's, to filibuster, no, I'm not a fan of that, believe me,
Director,
Yeah.
we're just
Yeah.
sharing with you.
Yeah, I know, I again, in respect to past boards, I wasn't here, different dynamics, things have changed.
Good.
And so that's
Yeah.
the beauty and the beast of democracy, is that we continue to evolve.
We're happy to do it. We're happy to do it.
Thomas, you've been to the Thomas Jefferson Memorial, right? If you go to Thomas Jefferson Memorial, one of his quotes on the wall is really just powerful. And he talks about how things evolve. For us to expect that we're going to continue to wear diapers the way we did when we were kids, it's just, we evolve, and that's what this is about.
You get no pushback. You get no pushback from us.
So, that's what I would request, is just for that to be forwarded to the board for a full
It'll
discussion.
come to the board meeting with strike-throughs and new language and options for the board.
Yeah, but I think everything else, I think it's not a burden. I think it's more than fair and to put in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we will move it to the board as such. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll go on to item 7.
So do we need a motion?
No.
Okay, fine.
Item, we have 6B, investment report, liquidity and days cash valuation.
6B, you said?
Yes.
Okay, so again, going through the investment report and liquidity, you can see that We still continue to have a very strong position. We are,
Can I stop for a
yeah,
minute?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, you went to 6B, but
It's up on the corner.
no, it says
He's looking for the
number
report.
8A.
He's looking for the report.
Oh, you gotta go back.
That's 8A. Okay,
Yeah,
never mind. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so if you go to the total investment report, so again, things continue to look good. However, we had some of the wettest months we've had in a while. That reduced, and again, 75 to 80% of water usage is outside. It's not inside. So recycled water took a big hit. I think it was 1 month it was almost 70%, 1 month it was almost 50%. Now, heat is coming back. We might be rebounding over the summer. But cash is a high priority. Peggy, who has access to the bank account, every morning, and I'm not kidding you, every morning she sends me our cash balance. We're watching our cash very carefully. We're liaisoning with engineering. Eleanor does the deposits, so he goes to the mail, picks up the checks, makes the deposits, and then sends us an update. The reason why we're saying that is because a large part, that phasing strategy that we talked about in our engineering committee, it plays a big part in our ability to move through our projects. But again, you know, and then I put the full numbers for you, Director Walter. So you can see that, yes, $15.8 million is still pretty good. Unfortunately, we did have to spend $1.2 million as part of a legal settlement. It is what it is. But right now, we're very, very closely monitoring. We like to keep our operating cash balance as close to $1 million as possible, so somewhere between $900,000 and $1.2 million at the end of every month. The reason why we keep that balance high is because we have the emergency repairs that happen. Some of those are unexpected and unplanned, and they're generally gonna be between $50,000. We had one last year for $500,000. And those are just unexpected stuff. Most of our emergency repairs, our airbags get sheared off due to cars running over them, veering off, or car accidents. So you can see here, we're doing pretty well. To another point, we also have the renovation of our headquarters. And so we're gonna be arranging basically a day where we're gonna say, okay, from 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock, directors, please feel free. Matt Wagner, the real estate agent, will be on site. You can walk inside, you can tour, you can ask any questions. But we have that renovation project, right? So we have a lot of moving parts here, and we took a dip in our revenue for a couple of months. So we think we're gonna bounce back. We're not that worried, but again, you know, we are tightening the belt straps here. So the 15.8 sounds like a big number, but it goes quick if you don't pay attention. So we had unrestricted cash of 13.2. Like I mentioned, in the bank, we had 1.1 million. In our state reserves, we have 6.1. In our county reserve, we have 1.1, and with UBS, we have 4.8. We have 2.5 in our restricted cash, and again, as a friendly reminder, we are on a direct intercept program with the county. So when they collect a standby charge from the property owners, they send it directly to the trustee. It does not come through Central Basin, it goes directly to the trustee. Those payments are made in August. So there's 2.5 million in there right now. What you're gonna see is you're gonna see that drop. Probably, it may not make it for the August report, but you'll see it in the September report. It'll drop down to like $200,000 because in August is when they make the debt payments to the bondholders. You can see the interest rates are high. You know, unfortunately, stock market goes down, bond rates go up. So it's a blessing for us, but it's bad for, you know, our 401ks. So you can see that on there. And again, it is important to remember that, you know, we are a special district, so we don't have an enterprise fund. We don't have multiple funds. We don't have a tax roll that we collect from. We don't have a sales charge that we collect from. So in essence, our reserves, even though we refer to them as reserves, they're basically retained earnings. And retained earnings are not technically restricted. They're money that you made selling whatever product you have, and you can draw them out whenever you need to. Now, if you looked at our budgets every year for the last 3 years, we've always projected a need to dip into our reserves to cover any shortcomings in the budget. Now, remember, the budget is just on paper and it's a projection of what we think we're gonna spend. But we've never had to use it. We've never had to actually dip into our reserves. So we keep building up that balance, building up that balance. And so, I think Owner just made a deposit yesterday, so you can see that it's the 13th of July. And I think our bank balance right now is about 2.2 million. So that's good, because we're less than halfway through the month and we've already collected a significant amount of money. Our Met bill, I think for June, Owner, do you remember what it's gonna be? 2.8? 2.4. So even though that sounds like a big number, remember, we just passed that through. But we do collect a surcharge on that. So when our Met bill goes up, it means our surcharge collection goes up as well. So we're hoping to see some recouping.
Excuse me, I think Joey has his hand up.
We have-
You got a question?
No, we can't take questions. So we can't, so again, that pass-through, and we don't include that pass-through in these balances. So I want to make sure that you know that the Met revenue, we don't put in here, because it's a false, it would inflate our numbers. So that's going to come through. If you turn the page, you can see that our average balance dropped with that, after we made that payment. So the reason it spiked up and then went down was because the insurance company gave us $1 million to pay the full $2.2 million settlement. So you can see that it went up to 16 and then down to 13. And so the average monthly balance for the last fiscal year was $15.8 million. And so if you compare that to the previous years, you can see that since the fiscal year of 2021, we've been pretty good at managing our cash and holding on to our money. I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have at this time. And then again, the exhibits give you the more detailed breakdown of where the money is.
Director Baltari?
All right. I have another request, and I think I've asked this before. What I don't see in the financials here is, I understand what the budget is very well. I know the budget is your guide, but the budget also tells us where our money's going. So I never see that. I don't see anything against the actuals to budget.
Right.
And I've requested that before. I want to see actuals to budget. So we're starting a brand new fiscal year right now. What I should have seen today is, for the full year, I would have had what we actually spent. Well, actually, you wouldn't, because you wouldn't have it probably yet. But even if it was May, then I would have 11 months of what actual was to what our budget was. And then you have a percentage on where you're at. If you're over, because you get hit with a leak and it takes you over in that account, that's easy to explain. You come in and say, hey, the reason why it's 150% is because we had a leak on Norwalk Boulevard, whatever it was. Okay, and it was repaired, that's where it came out of. If you don't, as you mentioned, and you put into our budget that we're gonna pull, we may have to pull out of our reserves.
Right.
You could show there that we never pull up, so right there it's saying, oh, we didn't pull any money out of reserves. So it says 0, even though it maybe should be 89, it's 0. I wanna see that. I wanna see that
Do you want
every month.
So this is an investment report. So what we can do is we can add, as part of this committee, let me ask you, what would be the most accurate report? Would it be a bi-monthly or a quarterly report? I just don't know we can get a monthly one.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. You can get a monthly one. I'm gonna tell you that right now.
Because that means everything has to be posted.
Yeah, but then.
What you're going to be doing is, I'm not gonna say, because by the end of the month, when we have our board meeting, you may not have it for the committee meeting because it's too early in the month. Okay? I will agree 100% on that.
Yeah.
But by the end of the month, when we get to our board meeting, they should have all of their stuff already closed their books for the month before. and they should be able to have that document.
Like that would be more ideal, like, 'cause, yeah, for sure, for the first week or like for the first meeting, you won't, and eventually they'll,
So basically like a lagging
Yeah.
monthly report. Okay, we
You
can
know,
do that.
and-
better.
Yeah.
And what he would be bringing back to us in our committee meeting, yes, that might be a month behind, but if we can have a more robust discussion in this meeting on different things that we take back to the board, but I think the board should be able to see what is actually going on month to month compared to what we budgeted, and we know exactly where everything's going.
Yeah, so we
And
can, yeah,
that's,
so
I
we-
understand this is an investment.
This is just the investment report, but we can add a budget report to it, a budget performance report. Because we can just pull that off the
honestly,
system.
because in your budget, you're gonna have what your cash is. You're gonna have what you have in your life. You're, all that's gonna be documented within your monthly thing.
Good, yeah, that's not a
So,
problem.
it's
No,
not
I would-
necessarily that I need to see this every month, because this, even though it's nice to see, doesn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
I really, okay, yeah, so it says 13, we have $13.28 million in the bank. Great. Our budget is, how much is our budget?
The net
Central
budget-
Basin budget, how much is it?
The net budget is gonna be around,
And take out metro costs.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, yeah, so it'd be around.
Honor, do you know that?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah, so it would be around.
Why are they
14
paying?
Million,
How much?
it would be somewhere between 17 and 18 million,
Okay.
depending.
So in theory, we probably should have about 8 million in the bank just for a 6-month reserve.
And the new stuff.
Yeah.
And then now, when you put that into, you're down to 5 million.
Okay, well, what we can do is we'll add what's called the budget performance report to this agenda. This investment report is what's been done for years.
Yes, and I understand that, and that's what I'm gathering on.
So
to
we
shake it
can,
up a little.
we can have a budget performance report, that's very easy to do. My thing is that what we want to do, what we do internally is we do monitor the budget performance report, because what we're doing is we're looking at the fiscal year, and we're saying, okay, as terms of revenues, right? What percentage of our revenues have we collected, and what percentage of the year has gone by? So if we're 60% through the year, but we've only collected 30% of our projected revenues, that's a problem.
That's correct.
And the same thing would be, what we monitor is, if we budgeted $10 million in expenses, right? And we're 60% of the year through the fiscal year, but we're 80% over, then that's a problem. So we do this monitoring. I just wanted to make sure I understood, because I want to make sure that when I give you that report, that the books have been closed for that month that you're looking at. So we can do that for sure. That's not a
Well,
problem.
even if it wasn't closed, they would have what month it's closed in that they're presenting to us.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah,
And then
yeah.
we're all smart enough to understand,
Yeah.
okay, it's through March, it's through whatever it is, to know where we're at and where we stand.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we can print that right off of Tyler. It comes right off of Tyler.
as we're going through it, then we're looking at it, we know exactly where we're at
Yeah.
within that month that we're at in the percentage. And we know where all the money's going.
Yeah.
And even if you have if your sales are lower, for us, it's different for us here, because we don't, from what I understand, the way that I'm understanding our thing, our money's gonna drop if water isn't sold by Met. Okay, we're billing out Met's water, we cut a check to Met because we collect their monies, okay? So their revenue's gonna drop just like ours does, because we're not selling. But for them, if they don't sell the water, they're also not buying it. So kind of the same thing, we're not buying it if we're selling it. So
Yeah.
when I'm looking at my budget, typically if I'm down, which it was this year, it was way down in our water usage. So my income was lower, but also same was my expenses, because I didn't have to buy the water. So it kind of,
Yeah, and what the nice thing about the Tyler report that you're gonna get is you'll see on there, it has year-to-date postings, and then it tells you what percentage
Correct.
has been posted. So that's not a problem. We'll just put it as a separate item, and it'll be a standing item, and then we'll print it up for you guys.
all right.
But it is gonna have Met in there though, so you're gonna see like a
Well, that's
lot
easy for us
of
to,
water sales and stuff.
there might be even a way that they could separate, because when you give us a budget, you have Central Basin budget, you have Met in the middle,
Yeah.
and then you have the total.
Yeah.
They're two separate things when I see the budget.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily, we need to know what this is because we're sending a check to them.
Yeah.
But I'm not worried so much about the water that we have to give
Well, let's
as much as what we're doing
We'll print
with
it,
ours.
we'll print it for you, you'll look at it, if you don't like it and you want us to
Well, I
maybe
think it's
print
a
something different.
board thing as we go through it. You could run through the committee here,
Yeah.
but if there's something else that needs to be cleaned up, then that's a whole board discussion.
Yeah, it's called a budget performance report, it's easy to do.
So, thank you. I do not have anything else. Thank you.
I have a quick question, actually it's more for general counsel. So, if I'm seeing this correctly, what we're considering right now, this is the investment report, liquidity and days cash evaluation for July 2023, but the agenda stated June 2023.
So which page are you?
And the agenda itself is the second page. So it'd be at the top.
Yeah.
For June 2023.
I would say that they made a mistake there.
Yeah.
They should have said June because this is all June for the
This is-
end of the
Alex,
month.
is it supposed to say July or is it supposed to say June at the
Well,
top of the?
here's the
page?
funny thing, it's the July report
Yeah.
based on June's numbers.
Yeah.
Okay, then we shouldn't be
So-
discussing it because it wasn't agendized
Correct.
properly.
Okay, so, no, I mean, it's the June numbers, but it's the July report, so the agenda, you're saying the
So
agenda?
it's always a month prior.
Yeah,
Because there's a mislabeling, if that's the case, like, 'cause this one is titled July 2023, this is June.
yeah, see, that's the problem.
So,
So the
yeah,
agenda item
June-
just needs to be, however it is, it needs to inform the public what's going to be discussed, and I think this could be misinterpreted as the June report, and if
Okay.
theoretically somebody wanted to address July report, they may have skipped
We
today's
can
meeting.
fix it. I think the confusion is that it's June, the end of June
Correct.
30th, but it's for the July meeting,
Correct.
so
So-
we'll fix
So an
it.
abundance of caution, if you wanted to stop discussion on this
Yeah.
item and wait for the board meeting for it to be properly agendized.
Yeah, I would recommend that, because again, just to make sure we're complying with the Brown Act, even a mislabeling like that, I've been a part of these things where something was mislabeled, and I had to wait on even approving warrants till the next meeting because it was a typo.
Yeah, no worries. We'll
So,
change it.
I think a good, middle of the ground going forward, again, just an idea would be, like a June 2023 activities. You wanna- That way you're covered.
On the agenda.
On both, because these,
On both?
I think both the report title and the agenda item title have to match.
June activities?
So just, again, for consideration that if you want to identify that that's what it's for, even though it's in the July meeting, that it's
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
activities,
we can do
just
that.
reflect it for June, just an
Ours
idea.
is, for mine, it just says, it just has a month that we're gonna be talking about, so we have the May, financials. Even though it's presented in June, it's May financials on my agenda.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, so.
I'm gonna-
We're gonna let you kind of figure that out, and
Not a problem.
that way we cover you and ourselves and everyone. And
Yeah, it's
make
just a
sure
weird
that-
report, because you're talking about
Yeah.
the month before.
Yeah, I have an item next month, next week before one of my boards, and it's, again, activities that happened last month, but it's this month.
I like it. I like it.
Just, that's the way I get out of it. So, for cautionary purposes, I would recommend we stop discussion on this item and just continue general counsel and chair.
And what item?
6B.
To no longer consider 6B as of right now, because we're not in compliance with the Brown Act.
So it'll be agendized for the regular board meeting
Yes, sir.
with the updated description, and it'll be discussed then.
Yeah, so for this committee to cease discussion on this, that doesn't mean that we don't forward it to the board.
Yeah.
The board can still consider this.
Is that legal?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we want to reports and correspondence.
I didn't
He
catch that.
didn't give me the floor, that.
We have no reports and correspondence. We move on to item 8, action items, the administrative code update.
Thank you. So this was brought at the request of the board again. This is specifically speaking to unruly behavior and lack of decorum on behalf of anyone in the attending a board meeting, but also more specifically directors as well. You can say, you give a warning, you gavel, so on and so forth. So Derek, I'll leave this to you since you prepared the language, but in essence, what we're doing is we're adding to our administrative code Under 4.4 rules of conduct, there's a, see how it says item A, B, and C? There's no changes to the current language in the admin code, but language prior to item number D.
Sure, so I have a few comments, and then certainly willing to answer any questions. So as of this year, the ability to remove a specific individual for actual disruption was added to the Brown Act, and it's codified in government code as indicated here. So the code itself is cited, and then a practical procedure of applying that code is then suggested below. So that's the first comment. The second comment, given the previous discussion from this committee, it's important to note that this is a largely content neutral. It should not be wielded as a tool to silence criticism. It should not be wielded as a tool because you disagree with what somebody is saying. When the Brown Act uses the phrase disrupting to refer to actual disruption. What this is effectively not that somebody's talking for a long period of time, or kind of veering a little bit off topic, but they're preventing the meeting from actually moving forward. You know, a clear-cut example of that would be if somebody marched into the meeting with a bullhorn and played an air horn through it and just kept doing it minute after minute. That would be an actual disruption because then the meeting cannot continue. Obviously, that's an extreme example. Things short of it can. That's going to be at the discretion of the chair, certainly consultation with general counsel. But again, given the discussion earlier, I want to clarify this shouldn't be used as a substitute for rules of order.
So when we talk about if if somebody goes off a topic and they're not staying on topic of what we're discussing, would that be it if they continued?
It would depend on how extremely disruptive it is. If it's slightly veering off topic, I would say no. If, for example, the agenda item is the budget and somebody goes on a 20-minute lecture about something that has absolutely nothing to do with the budget, at some point in those 20 minutes, I think it would be appropriate to say it's actually disrupting. But again, I would caution against using it as an immediate, like, oh, you're out of order. That's your first warning. And then suddenly removing somebody. So there's not a cut and dry, but it's, I would say, exercising cautiously.
Okay.
Okay, well, I mean, you kind of gave us an answer, but with no answer behind it.
It's going to depend on the comments. It's going to depend on, well, context matters, essentially.
And you kind of go on with 20 minutes. We're not going to wait 20 minutes for somebody to disrupt any meeting.
So again, that was for,
I mean, we can tell by the language and by, you know, how many cents they got upstairs if they're going to try to distract the meeting, disrupt the meeting in any way.
So things that are unpleasant or maybe make the conversation longer or more difficult, I wouldn't consider actual disruption. Again, it's something that's preventing the meeting from going forward. And that's going to be discretionary. It's going to depend
Okay,
on the
let me put an
specific
example to you. Okay, right now we're having a meeting, somebody starts yelling crazy things from the audience. What is that?
If it's preventing us from continuing discussion of items, then that would be an actual disruption, and that would be the first warning.
Okay.
If it's a few spare words and then they stop, that's not an actual disruption. It has to be something that's preventing the meeting from actually moving forward in a reasonable context. A couple of seconds of disruption, that's not going to be sufficient.
How about, so let's say Director Garza has the floor, and he can't get 3 words out without being interrupted by a colleague. That's, I mean, how long does he have to wait before he goes to the chair and says, hey, help me out here?
I think he can go to the chair immediately, but it's going to be at the chair's discretion to say, look, that's not actually disruptive, or that is actually disruptive. I know everyone would like a cut and dry. If it's exactly 2 minutes and 24 seconds, and then that's an actual
I'm not asking for
disruption.
a time, I'm asking, because you said a bullhorn, right? A bullhorn, you know, through a mega speaker is disruptive, right? And people can't talk, but also, if Richard Garza's trying to ask a question, and he keeps getting over-talked, that's the equivalent of a bullhorn. It's preventing me from hearing what he's saying, it's preventing everyone from him. So it's not a mechanical device, right? But it is preventing him from, if he has the floor, right? So if he has the floor, he has the floor, and he's not yielding his time. I mean, I would assume that, you know, the proper way would be, Director Garza, would you mind yielding your 2 minutes of your time? You said something that I want to, whatever. If he says, hey, what, I yield 2 minutes? Director Valteri, go ahead. Well, you know, I disagreed with you. You said, I don't know. But what I'm saying is, you know, when you say context, I'm just saying that not preventing the meeting from moving forward, I don't think is always by some third party or some mechanical device. Sometimes it's just by screaming louder than the person who's trying to talk.
So to answer the question, it's going to depend on the comments, but what I would say is if it's a temporary interruption, you know, for example, Director Garza was asking a question and he was interrupted for 10-15 seconds, and then he could speak afterwards, I would not consider that a natural disruption. If the director is trying to prevent him from speaking by every time he opens his mouth, shouts him down, then I think that could rise to the level of actual disruption. What it comes down to is if the removal is challenged in a court, we need to be able to stand up to a judge and say with a straight face, because of A, B, and C, we could not continue.
With a straight face.
Okay.
I don't have any questions.
Director Garza?
Same here, Chair.
Okay, let's go on next item.
So, no motion to just forward it to the board.
Good.
We're gonna move on to consent items. Items 9A through 9D.
So what we'll do is, on this case, what we're gonna do is, the revisions, the resolution will be, and the options will be presented to the board at the next meeting prior to the consent calendar. So I think it's okay to move these to the meeting because, and Derek, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that we can put language in the resolution for consent that says to take effect immediately so that they can then pull that day.
Okay.
Okay, is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because I have
actually like that.
questions and
Okay.
we're not able
No,
to
no.
respect the process, but I like that.
Okay,
the
so
next
we're
one.
good.
Yeah.
So then we'll just move this to the thing. So now we go into closed session.
Closed session. All right, we are now going into closed session.